The rain had been falling for days over the quiet valley town of Maple Creek, a forgotten corner of rural America where the mountains touched the sky and life moved slow. The air smelled of wet soil and pine. Roads turned to rivers, and rivers turned wild. But for Ethan Miller, a 19-year-old boy who lived with his grandmother in a small wooden cabin at the edge of town, rain wasn't just weather, it was a test of survival. Ethan's father had been a logger before an accident took his life. Since then, Ethan had been the man of the house, taking odd jobs, cutting firewood, and helping neighbors patch fences after storms. He didn't complain, he never did. Life had taught him that complaining didn't stop the rain, and it sure didn't fill the pantry. That morning, the radio warned that the Clearwater River was rising fast. Flash flood watch for the northern counties, the voice said, calm but grim. Most folks in Maple Creek knew what that meant, stay inside, stay high. But Ethan had a delivery to make. Old Mrs. Hanley needed her medicine from the next town, and nobody else was willing to brave the road. Ethan strapped on his raincoat, jumped on his rusty old pickup, and started the drive through the forest road. The rain thickened, hitting the windshield like bullets. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. As he rounded a sharp curve near the old wooden bridge, he saw something strange, a sleek black car stalled halfway across, its headlights blinking weakly through the storm. The river below raged like an angry beast, logs and debris crashing against the bridge supports. Who the hell's out here now? Ethan muttered, pulling over. Through the sheets of rain, he could barely make out a figure inside, a woman, pounding on the window. Panic. Trapped. Without thinking twice, Ethan jumped out, his boots splashing into the cold water. Hey! You okay in there? He shouted, but the roar of the current drowned his voice. He ran onto the bridge, every plank creaking under his weight. The woman's car was half submerged on the passenger side. Water was already seeping into the cabin. Don't move, he yelled again, motioning with his hands. She looked terrified, her makeup streaked, her hands trembling against the glass. Ethan tugged at the door, but it was jammed. The river's force had wedged the car against the railing. He pulled a crowbar from his truck, always kept one for road repairs, and wedged it under the handle. Come on, he grunted. The metal screamed but didn't give. Then, with a desperate shove, the lock snapped open. Come on, ma'am, take my hand. The woman hesitated, frozen with fear. I can't. You can. Ethan shouted, leaning in, gripping her wrist. He pulled hard, her body sliding across the seat as water surged inside. With one last tug, she spilled into his arms, and the two stumbled back toward the road. The bridge groaned behind them. Go, he yelled, half carrying her. They barely reached the edge before the bridge collapsed with a deafening crack, swallowed by the roaring river below. Both fell onto the muddy shoulder, gasping for air. The rain poured down relentlessly, cold and heavy, but they were alive. Ethan pushed his wet hair out of his eyes and looked at her. She was maybe late 20s, early 30s, dressed in what used to be a pristine white business suit now smeared with mud. Diamond earrings glimmered faintly under the gray sky. You all right? He asked, breathing hard. She nodded weakly, shivering. You saved my life. Ethan shrugged. Just did what anyone would do. But she knew that wasn't true. Nobody else had been crazy enough to be on that road today. He led her to his truck and gave her his flannel jacket. She looked around the beat-up interior, duct tape on the dashboard, cracked window, and a tiny American flag dangling from the mirror. You live around here? She asked, still shaking. Yeah, he said. Just down the road. You. She hesitated. New York. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Well, that explains the car. She almost smiled. My name's Charlotte Hayes. Ethan, he said simply, turning the heater on full blast. He drove her to his cabin. Inside, it was small but warm, a wood-burning stove, a worn sofa, and shelves filled with books that didn't match the roughness of the place. His grandmother, a gray-haired woman with soft eyes, hurried to bring towels and tea. Charlotte sat by the stove, watching the steam rise from her cup. The thunder outside faded to a distant grumble. Why were you out there? Ethan asked. I was, heading to a property site, she said quietly. I run a company that funds community development. I was supposed to visit a land deal near here. Ethan nodded, uninterested in big city talk. You're lucky the bridge didn't give way sooner. She studied him, his calloused hands, his calm composure, his quiet decency. There was something rare about it, something she hadn't seen in boardrooms or penthouses. When the storm cleared hours later, he offered to drive her to town. But the roads were closed, so she stayed the night. They talked, not like people from different worlds, but like two strangers who found honesty in the middle of nowhere. She told him about her late father, a billionaire real estate tycoon. He told her about growing up poor, working since he was 12. You ever dream of leaving? She asked. He chuckled. Every night. But someone's gotta keep this town alive. The next morning, rescue crews arrived. They took Charlotte back to her hotel in the city. Before leaving, she turned to Ethan and said softly, I won't forget this. He smiled. Don't make promises you can't keep. Weeks passed. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. Ethan went back to chopping wood and fixing fences. But one afternoon, a black SUV rolled up his driveway, spotless, unlike the one he'd pulled from the river. Charlotte stepped out, this time in jeans and sneakers. I told you I wouldn't forget, she said, handing him a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter from her company, a notice that Maple Creek would receive a full restoration grant, a new bridge, community center, and small business fund. Ethan stared, speechless. Why are you doing this? He asked finally. Because you reminded me what wealth is supposed to do, she said. Change lives. The next months transformed the town. Construction crews arrived, kids got new school supplies, and for the first time in decades, Maple Creek looked hopeful again. The townspeople didn't know the full story, they just knew a miracle had arrived after the flood. Ethan refused to take credit. But Charlotte made sure he was hired as local coordinator for the project. He worked day and night, and slowly, something more than gratitude grew between them, respect, admiration, and maybe something deeper they both didn't dare name. When the project finished, Charlotte stood with him by the rebuilt bridge, the same place where their paths had first crossed. The river below was calm, reflecting the evening light. You ever think about how crazy it was? She asked. He smiled. You mean me running into a flood to save a stranger? I mean destiny, she said. How it finds us in the strangest ways. He looked out at the river. Guess sometimes you have to lose the bridge to find what really matters. They stood there quietly as the sun dipped behind the hills. In that silence was something sacred, two worlds that were never meant to meet, yet somehow did. And from that day forward, Maple Creek was no longer just another poor town on the map. It was a symbol, a reminder that courage and kindness can build bridges stronger than steel. And that, my friends, is the story of a poor village boy from Maple Creek who saved a woman from a deadly flood, never knowing she was a billionaire who would return to change his entire world. Life has a way of testing the brave and rewarding the kind. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful, true inspired tales that remind us, heroes can come from anywhere, and sometimes, the richest hearts live in the poorest homes.